This is a podcast from Rover.
Welcome back into Rural Exchange on your Saturday morning. Time now to take a look at what's happening in the world of rural real estate. And it's a very good morning to the GM of Rural at Property Brokers. That is Conrad Wilkshire. G'day, Conrad. How are you?
Morning, Dom.
Now, you told me about this on my show, but we'll ask it again because it's interesting what came out of it. So you recently held your Property Brokers National Rural Conference, and broadly speaking, you looked at the forces at play driving land use change across rural New Zealand, right?
Yeah, we did. And yeah, I've done a little bit more homework since we last spoke as well, because it's just really interesting what's happening in the rural land market, particularly when you go back 20 years.
Yeah, and what we're going to see, according to the stuff I've read from what came out of that conference, is ongoing demand for land over the next decade. Yeah,
big time. And we're not breaking any news here, Dom. If you go back to the last 20 years, there's an old cliche that they're not making any more land. Well, actually, it's not even that. There's actually less of it available for farming. It's like, and we're not talking small change. Like, we've gone from 70-odd thousand farms back in 2000 to about 50,000 farms now, and we've gone from about 15.5 million hectares of land and farming production primary systems to 13, a drop of over 2.2 million hectares, about 15% less over the last 20 years. And if you have a look at that trend today, depending on how you look at these carbon interests, whether they're actually going to be production forestry or not, and how that might be classified, if you look at that end on the extensive country, and then you look at urbanisation and its the amount of ground and on the town boundary, that rural land that's being consumed, that these changes are not slowing down. If anything, from what we're seeing, the demand seems to be as strong as ever. So, there is, the good news, Dom, is that if you are passionate about farming and you've got a long-term intergenerational outlook, the underlying value of the asset is in good shape. And to be honest, most of those situations, the asset valuation is not top of mind anyway. It's much more around the farm production system and a sustainable farming system and the investment in the land. But it is, I think, encouraging now for farmers who are reinvesting back in their properties and continue to, meet the challenges that are in front of them, to be able to do that with confidence. Because if you're going to diversify or do something in the farm business, it's going to cost several $1,000s a hectare. If you've had the revaluations of the last few years, it gives a solid platform to make those decisions, and the returns are there, clearly.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, for those who choose to hold their land over the next decade or so, there's certainly benefits there.
Oh, yeah, big time. And you're dealing with strong demand for the underlying commodities and the produce that we produce, and include growers in that, obviously. And so that demand's not there, and you've got a shortening of the supply. Those two factors bode well for those taking a long-term view and committing capital long-term and trying to make their decisions. I do really believe that people are still finding value, because the underlying outlook for the next 5 to 10 years and the demand for land over the next 5 to 10 years, it is difficult to find another decade that lines up with the current one in terms of that demand equation. So and we've already seen, threefold increases in these station valuations over the last few years. And these same stations, we're struggling to get offers on the table from one season to the next in some of these more extensive properties. So the only reservation I have is that farmers themselves, and we've spoken about this before, but I will bring it up again, is that sequestering carbon is not necessarily going to be on everybody's agenda, though understanding it and accounting for it will be, and it's going to be that those requirements are going to be as much from our terms of trade to the banking facilities that everybody holds. That will be part of the bioeconomy going forward. And so when you take a step back from all of that, sequestering carbon is actually a property right. and understanding what's actually going on your farm system now. Currently, with that, we're getting a better fix on that already. Things are moving fast on that, and the accounting for it and everything else will become a lot more robust, and people will get, and it will become part of the language. But not taking a hedge at all, and if you've got an extensive property and you want to see the farm go and you actually want to be able to compete against your neighbour, the neighbour that maybe looked at some diversification or had some of those significant benefits from sequestering carbon, maybe in a stronger position cash flow wise to actually, bid up on the block next door. So it really does come down to your outlook and hedging and taking I think a hedge in there. And I'm not into planting trees for no good purpose. Sustainable, managed, biodiverse plantings, and it can include natives obviously as well. But forestry can potentially have a place in a sustainable way. And I've always felt there's got to be room for farmers and local communities to be maybe collaborate a little bit. And farmer cooperatives have been a part of our New Zealand landscape forever. And irrigation schemes would be another good example. And it just occurs to me as, rather than farmers just looking at their own 50 hectares, if they were able to, in a district, collaborate and think about how they would look at that. There is opportunity, I think, to think a little bit more laterally past the immediate farm gate as well, in terms of how they might, gain some access into that market without having to, change their farm system or feel like they're walking away from a pastoral-based business. Because everything I read, the pastoral-based businesses are in great heart, and the underlying valuations are underpinned on a whole raft of things, not least of which there's a finite amount of land and there's real demand at a range of levels for it.
Yeah, it's well broken down, actually. You mentioned bioeconomy there. What exactly are you talking about? Well,
we're changing really from fossil fuels, and at the moment we're all sort of looking on the sideline as to what does that really mean, and how on earth would we get these electric cars moving, and how's that all going to happen? But it's kind of happening faster than we think already, and you might have seen that hydrogen chase boat of Team New Zealand that caught a lot of media attention, and you've got significant transport companies, significant rural transport companies looking at hydrogen options for there. You've got Milky, the Fonterra truck, so they're all early indicators of change. And the funny thing about change, it's sort of like it's a lot of chat, and then all of a sudden it just seems to happen. Often feels like it happens overnight. And
yeah, good point.
I think 5 years from now, it'll be very interesting to see what the conversation is around and the technology transformation that's going, and what batteries are actually doing what 5 years from now. But there's just no question about any of it that we are moving away from fossil fuels, and we are moving to a bioeconomy. So things that grow and store carbon, you look at. I pay a lot of attention to what Professor Warren Parker often speaks to, and this whole storage of carbon and how that is done, and then the biofuels and how that all works, and hydrogen is going to play a bigger and bigger role, and there's some really exciting developments on all that. But it's all early doors, but I got a sense, by the time 2030 comes around, and it all seems to come around faster than we ever want. I think we're going to see a lot of change, and I still say our farmers hold all the power in that. They own the land. They have the biggest say in what gets planted where, and I think they can be a beneficiary or not as they choose to. And we just want to see more farmers on the other side of the transaction. We just don't see it as the domain of institutions and large corporates. We think farmers themselves can have a say. And when farmers have collaborated, they've formed some very powerful international co-ops, and they've done all sorts of things. So I just don't believe we have to leave it all to multinationals to have a say in our future when it comes to forestry or anything else.
I think that's a really good point, actually. As you say, we've got a history there, so it's not outside the realms of possibility that groups of people can get together and make it work for them. Just a couple of quick things to finish on. Look, we've talked about the opportunities with land and stuff. For those looking to exit, though, there's still a very good case to be made for that as well, with the money you can fetch now.
Oh, no mistake. We transacted 55,000 hectares of farmland last year, and all the indications are that it's going to be bigger again this year, and the demand is there. And I think anybody, many farmers have taken very little out of their properties for, what has often been a lifetime of farming. So the window at the moment is, it's very, very good. And one thing we both know is commodity cycles don't track up and up and up. But right at the moment, there's enormous pressure on food, and food security seems to be much more in the language everywhere around the world now. So, for those who are looking to time an exit and thinking about the next strategy, there's a couple of good things in there. Is that for those who are the farming market, you really are getting it out at an all-time high. And then on the other side, if you're looking to invest, actually it's got a little bit more affordable in town now. So, you can probably have $1 each way and come out of it pretty well.
I think so too. And just finally, the Otaki region, that's been added to the PB stable, Conrad.
Yeah, looking forward to that. And, it's great to have another good local business joining a provincially based company. So, it's great. And we really value that support and look forward to what it brings forward.
Good man, entertaining as always and informative. Always appreciate it. That is Conrad Wilkshire, GM of Rural at Property Brokers. Actually, just in relation to that, I was just reading a story this week off RNZ, which says that the sale of 4 sheep and beef farms to overseas investors will turn about 7,100 hectares into rotational forests. That has been approved by the OIO. And it's issued its latest decisions made under the Special Forest Test. That test, of course, introduced back in 2018, designed to support the government's forestry policies, including more tree planting. And farming groups have raised concerns that too much productive farmland is being lost to trees. We have covered that, but that is the latest this week. So there's 4 sheep and beef farms sold to overseas investors, over 7,000 hectares worth. You are with Rural Exchange on your Saturday morning. Great to have your company. Up next, we're going to be talking to